Okay. All right, so you're a little bit smaller of a group, which is actually nice because I think as I'm going along, if there's a question or two, I could probably entertain those as we're going through. Otherwise, if we start to get behind, we'll save them for the end. Okay. All right, so has everybody started label reading by now? Kind of looking at things? Okay. Does anybody feel like it looks like that? This is actually a label, by the way. I don't recall off the top of my head what country, but it is actually a nutrition facts label. So yeah, sometimes it can feel like that's what you're looking at. So that's why we're going to go through each component and hopefully you'll have a better understanding then. All right, so reasons why we want to label read. Well, first of all, we want to be able to make informed choices, right? We want to determine if something's healthy for us, something's not so healthy for us. Determine what kind of nutrients are in there, right? If it has the right macronutrients, if it has the right vitamins and minerals that we're looking for. All of the nutrition facts labels are in standardized servings based on a 2,000 calorie diet. So that is something to keep in mind when you are reading the percent daily value. It just sticks a little bit, that's okay. So the percent daily value is actually based on a 2,000 calorie diet. So if you're on a 1,500 calorie diet, those numbers are going to change a little bit. Or if you're on a 2,500 calorie diet, then those change as well. So the standardized servings does make it easy to compare like products. So if you have two different types of crackers, for instance, you would be able to take them side by side. And then of course, if you're looking for allergen or intolerance information, such as if you have a gluten sensitivity or something like that, or an egg allergy, it's helpful to look at the labels. So there's three different components of the nutrition facts label that we're going to look at. It's the ingredient list, that's okay, the nutrition facts, and then the claims. So we'll go through each one of those. Keep in mind that some products are not labeled, and by law they don't have to be, and that includes very small packages. So for instance, those little instant pudding cups come to mind. You know, if they come in like a little 4-pack, the little thing that holds them together has the nutrition facts, but the individual cups don't have to be labeled. So individual packages, produce, so fresh fruits and fresh vegetables don't need to have nutrition facts on there. Raw meat, poultry or fish, coffee, tea and spices, alcohol, food prepared in the store. So if like you go to Sendik's and get potato salad, technically they don't have to have a nutrition facts label on there. Or foods made by small manufacturers. So this is typically what a nutrition facts label is, so we'll break that down. But before we get to the nutrition facts label, I do like to start in the ingredient list. And the reason for that is sometimes we look at all the nutrition facts and all the numbers look perfect and everything looks great. And then we come down to the ingredient list and we're like, wow, what is this really made of? So maybe it's a really low calorie product and it has very little fat and the sodium looks great, but then you come to the ingredient list and it's mostly made up of, I don't know, sugar or chemicals. So sometimes starting in the ingredient list can be a great option. But it's up to you. You can either start in the nutrition facts or go to the ingredient list. But keep in mind the ingredient list is just as important. So the ingredient list, I apologize, it's a little cut off there, but the ingredient list tells us what's in the product, first of all. It's listed in descending order by weight. So the first ingredient is going to be what it's mostly made up out of versus the last ingredient. So with this one, it's cooked kashi is the first ingredient, and whole milk powder is the last ingredient. So it has it's mostly made up out of this cooked kashi. Words you want to avoid in the ingredient list. Partially hydrogenated oils, so that's another term for trans fats. We'll talk a little bit about that too. Artificial colors like red or yellow 50 or whatever, red blues, all those things. Any type of chemical names, so if you're not familiar with it, can't pronounce it, you may want to rethink about whether or not it's appropriate or healthy product for you. And then of course, a lot of words for sugars or high fructose corn syrup. And keep in mind that sugar can come in like 60 different words. So you might want to Google, kind of become savvy about what that all entails. It could be molasses, it could be just regular old sugar, it could be cane juice. There's lots of different words for sugar.
What about
MSG? Yeah, that's gotten a lot of flack over the past couple of years. There was an article, I think Greatest wrote it, I could be wrong, but I read an article that actually said that there is naturally occurring MSG in foods. So, but I do know certain people that do have sensitivities to it, like get headaches when they eat the food, yeah.
Chinese restaurants?
Well, yes, yeah. Well, and that's the thing too, the amount of MSG they're using as well. So, you know, you can, it's kind of at your discretion. I don't really advocate for, going out and having a lot of it. And definitely if it has side effects for you, I would avoid it. But yeah, there was, I just can't remember, I think it was by Greatest, you might want to Google it. But there was one article that said that there are naturally occurring sources and that it may not be as bad as we have thought. So, but again, a lot of the stuff I've seen has said that it's not that good for you. Yeah.
Greatest, like G-R-A-D-I-S-T?
No, Greatist. Mm-hmm. They have a lot of articles on nutrition and exercise. It's greatest.com. But again, I think they wrote it. Sure. Okay, allergens and intolerances. So maybe you don't have an intolerance or an allergen, but somebody in your family does, or if you're hosting a party or whatever. So again, this might be important for you. They can cause mild or severe reactions in people with sensitivities or allergies. Never assume that a product does not contain an allergen. And the example to the left is a really great example because nowhere in the ingredient list do you see the word soy, and yet down on the bottom it says it contains soy. So sometimes what that means is that the product is processed on the same equipment as soy products. So like, I think M&Ms, plain M&Ms, a lot of times on the packaging it will say that it might contain peanuts because it's processed on the same equipment that M&M peanuts are. So that's something you want to pay attention to if that's a concern. The most common allergies are milk, eggs, fish, soy, wheat, peanuts, shellfish, and tree nuts. But again, that may not affect you at all. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be eating those things. All right, so serving size is way up at the top, the first thing that's listed in the nutrition facts, so I'm just going to start there and go down. So the serving size tells us the measurement of one serving. All the nutrients on the label are based on this amount. So notice that the serving size is 4 cookies. So there's not 220 calories in just one cookie, it's 4 cookies, right? So, or if you eat 8 cookies, now you have to double the calorie numbers. So keep that in mind. Servings per containers tells us how many servings are in the package. You can compare this amount to the amount that you eat. So again, did you eat 8 cookies, did you eat 2 cookies, 1 cookie? You can figure it out from there. Keep in mind that this is not necessarily a suggested quantity of food to consume. So again, this is a great example. Just because 4 cookies is 1 serving doesn't mean it's what we would recommend that you eat, right? All right, so the percent daily value, I had brought that up in the beginning. It's based on a 2,000 calorie diet. It helps you determine if a product is high or low in a nutrient. 5% or less is considered low, while 20% or more is considered high. So you would want to look for like your vitamins. You know, you want to see more towards the 20%. Whereas, like let's say sodium was a concern of yours, then you'd want to look more towards 5%, right? A good source of would be at least 10% of the daily value. So if it ever says on the front of a package, good source of, I don't know, calcium, then you would be able to look at the nutrition facts and it should be at least 10% or more of calcium per serving. Calories. There are some benefits with calories, so keep that in mind. They do give us energy, so we do have to have a good baseline of calories. And again, usually I tell everybody no lower than 1,200. Everybody's requirements are different, however. Of course, if we consume too many calories or don't burn off a certain amount, then it does lead to weight gain. Sources of calories includes any food or beverage that contains carbohydrates, fat, or protein. And that includes fruit and vegetable. Recommendations here on the nutrition facts. So 40 calories is considered low, 100 calories is moderate, and 400 calories is high, but it depends if you're having a meal or a snack. So for instance, if you're having a healthy frozen meal and it's 400 calories, well, that's okay because that's a whole meal. Versus if you're having a serving of, 8 crackers and it says 400 calories, well then obviously that would be a little inappropriate. Fat. There are benefits with fat. I know that's gotten some flack over the years as well. The benefits with fat, it helps your body to absorb nutrients. So when you're eating meals, you should have a good source of fat at your meals because again, if you're having fruits or vegetables, there's certain vitamins that fat helps your body to absorb. So it's good to have some. Fat also helps protect your organs. It has to do with cell function inside your body, healthy skin and hair. It insulates our nerves, and it also helps with satiety, so helping us to feel satisfied with meals and snacks. And you want that satisfaction. You don't always want to feel hungry. Cons, too much can lead to coronary artery disease and perhaps some cancers, especially if you are overweight. Sources of fat. The ones that you want to focus on would be the heart-healthy ones. So the lean meats, milk, yogurt, olive oil, canola oil, grapeseed oil, nuts, and eggs. And you would want to limit the processed foods and desserts.
Question.
Yep.
So when it says that too much fat can lead to coronary artery disease, does that include the better fats, like olive oil?
Sure,
Really? Okay.
sure. Yeah, anything in excess can be not a good thing. Even fruit, for instance.
Okay.
So fruit has lots of antioxidants, lots of fiber, lots of water, all good stuff. But again, if you're going way overboard and you're way beyond your needs for the day, then yeah, that can lead to problems with sugars, blood sugar spikes.
Sure.
So yeah, anything in excess is still a concern. So yeah, just because something is healthy doesn't mean you can kind of just go out and have however much of it.
No, I was just commenting on the difference between an animal fat and an olive oil. I wouldn't think olive oil caused coronary disease like an animal fat. That's what I meant.
Okay. I mean, I guess there's no studies that says that it would.
Okay.
I guess probably the more concerning thing would be is if it's leading to weight gain. And then weight gain can be associated with heart problems and things like that.
Sure.
So I guess, yeah, there's no direct link between too much olive oil and heart disease. But yeah, anything in excess that's going to lead to weight gain can then spiral into some of those other concerns. So yeah, there's no direct link, I should say that. Okay, recommendations. Your fat should comprise your calories about 20 to 30% of total calories for the day. So somewhere in that range. So again, if a lot of you are using like Spark People, MyFitnessPal, Lose It, any of those apps, a lot of them have the graphs and they'll tell you where your range falls. Aim for less than 3 grams of fat per serving. And then lean meat, poultry, and seafood should be about 10 grams of fat or less. Now again, if you're getting the fresh stuff, it's probably not going to tell you that on the label, although some of the ground beef does, I believe, or like the ground turkeys. So some of those will tell you that. All right, so differentiating between fats. Saturated fat is the one that we're most concerned about with heart disease. That should make up no more than 10% of your total daily calories. And again, a lot of those trackers do tell you that. Sources include fatty cuts of meat, processed foods, desserts, butter, and tropical oils. Unsaturated fat is just the opposite. It's been shown to improve cholesterol. Monounsaturated fat typically has a source of vitamin E, and it can be found in olive oil, canola oil, peanut oil, avocados, nuts, and seeds. Polyunsaturated fat has been linked to improving type 2 diabetes, and it can be found in safflower, sunflower, sesame, soy, and corn oil. So again, it's portion control with these types of things though. Trans fat. So I saw some nods earlier when I mentioned the partially hydrogenated. So we've kind of all heard about trans fats by now. And I think I just saw an article too that the FDA was pushing to ban trans fats in food. So that's good. And I think a lot of manufacturers are pretty much getting rid of that anyway because everybody's becoming savvy. But trans fats, basically your body is unable to metabolize it appropriately, so it kind of just sits in your arteries and gunks it up. So we want to avoid or limit it as much as possible. Sources include ice cream, cheese, poultry skin, fried foods, and candy. And not all of those products contain it, because again, a lot of them are eliminating it, but those are your common sources. Your recommendations are no more than 2 grams per day. Now, it can be a little tricky when reading the food labels until if this FDA ban passes, we have some time here. So when you are reading a label, if it says no trans fat on the label, that means no means no. So you should be able to go to the ingredient list and you should not see partially hydrogenated anything. However, 0 trans fats, the manufacturer is allowed to put up to 0.5 grams per serving. So even if you look at the nutrition facts label and it says 0 grams under trans fat, if you go down to the ingredient list, somewhere at the bottom they can put in that partially hydrogenated oil. So keep that in mind. 0 is different than no. Okay, cholesterol. So this actually just changed. Did you guys kind of see some stuff coming out about that? So cholesterol in food sources is no longer a concern. So that's great for egg yolk lovers. So benefits here, it does help with cell structure and function inside the body. So again, cons, now that they changed that, I don't know what the cons are anymore. So I kind of just defer to what I said with the saturated fat. So stay away from saturated fat sources that would have the cholesterol in there. So sources include, and ones that you want to focus on would be the lean or low fat cuts of meat, poultry, seafood, dairy, and eggs. Limit high fat dairy and cuts of meat, desserts, and butter, because again, those are typically the ones that have a lot of saturated fat. Recommendations, new research indicates that dietary cholesterol does not contribute to heart disease. So the only thing I will say about that is some of the research does still suggest limiting eggs for people with diabetes. I think that was still 2 to 3 eggs a week there, because there's some link there still. So, but if you don't have any concerns with diabetes, you should be able to eat eggs. Sodium. There are some benefits with sodium. It has to do with heart function. So we have a little sodium-potassium pump inside our body, and that helps our heart do what it needs to do. So if that pump gets out of, if the sodium-potassium levels get out of whack, that's when we start to see issues. So too much sodium can lead to fluid retention, bloating, and high blood pressure. So again, especially being a lady, you might notice if you have something salty a day or 2 before you get on the scale, you might notice a little bit of water retention there. Sources include table salt, ham, milk, and cheese. Not that you can't eat those things, just be aware of them. And then of course, limit fried, processed, canned foods, and bacon and sausage typically have a lot of salt in there as well. Recommendations for those without blood pressure or heart concerns, you can go up to 2,300 milligrams a day. Yeah, if anybody else needs to go to another class. For those that do have heart concerns, the American Heart Association recommends 1,500 milligrams as the cutoff for the day. I will admit though, that is a very challenging cutoff unless you're cooking everything from scratch, because just about everything we eat these days has sodium in it. So that might be a little bit of a challenge. It's not impossible, but.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I notice on my fitness pal, as I exercise, I'm permitted not only more calories, but also more sodium, or this, more everything across the board. And I thought the recommendation was, like, that's what you should have for the day, regardless of calories, is
The sodium?
on sodium.
Yeah,
I was surprised that it went up in terms of acceptable levels of sodium.
And it exceeded the 23?
I'm sorry.
100 days.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, granted you're gonna sweat some out, but I mean, you'd have to quantify how much you're sweating out, and everybody is different. So I probably would still stick with the 23. You know, and again, if you're not doing a lot of processed foods and things like that, you should be able to get it to that 23 or under. So.
Oh, and I do. It's just a matter of in terms of what they say I can have if I wanted to. That level went up, and I'm like, well, I thought 2,300 was kind of like a benchmark, regardless of how much you're exercising.
Yeah, I'd still keep it at that. Yeah, unless like, you know, if you were working out really hardcore, like outside in the heat for 90 minutes or whatever, and really sweating a lot, you know, then you could probably add some more in, but I would keep it at the 23. Unless you have low blood pressure, which is something different, then some people do need more. A low sodium product is typically 140 milligrams or less per serving. Again, that can be very challenging to find when you're eating boxed or canned foods. I will say also, to counteract some of the sodium, if you have a fruit or a vegetable that has potassium in it, along with that high sodium product, that can help a little bit to offset. Carbohydrates are also important. They are the main energy source for our muscles, and our brain does require a baseline of carbohydrates every day. However, too much can lead to blood sugar spikes, and I think we talked about that in the first session. When you have those yo-yos or those spikes in your blood sugar, that can lead to energy crashes, cravings, moodiness, all that good stuff that comes along with it. So having a good balance of carbohydrates and getting the right carbohydrates is very important. You'll want to focus on whole grain sources of carbohydrates. So you can have starchy vegetables, again, as long as it fits within your meal plan. Fruits, you'll want to look for low sugar cereals or whole grain cereals. Same thing, whole grain pastas, brown rices, whole grain breads, legumes, beans, potatoes, milk, and yogurts. And then of course limit juices, sodas, desserts, and candies, and try to limit like the white rices and the white breads and those types of foods. Recommendations here, you should fall somewhere between 45 and 65% for your total daily calories. Now if your goal is weight loss, you should fall closer to the 45% range as opposed to the 65%. Dietary fiber is part of carbohydrates, benefits include satiety, so again, helping you to feel satisfied. There's two different types of fiber. The first one is insoluble, and that helps prevent constipation. It keeps things moving along. Soluble fiber, on the other hand, helps to lower cholesterol and regulate blood sugars. Cons of too much fiber, it can cause some GI discomfort and binding to other nutrients. So the general recommendations here for most people are somewhere between 25 and 35 grams a day. And then the other thing I usually tell people is if you're trying to increase your fiber, like let's say you're getting 10 grams a day and you want to get up to 25, try to not increase it by more than 5 grams a day, because again, it might cause some discomfort. And make sure you're drinking plenty of fluids when you're increasing. So sources include veggies, fruits, cereal, again, whole grain pastas, brown rices, the whole grain breads, legumes, beans, potatoes, nuts, flaxseed, chia seed also has fiber. And then recommendations close to 5 grams per serving or greater, or at least 3 grams per serving. Cereal is a little more challenging, so 2.5, 3 grams per serving is pretty good. We'll talk about sugar. There are no steadfast rules with sugar, other than the American Heart Association recommends no more than 6 teaspoons a day for women and 9 for men, which in my opinion is a lot of sugar. And they're not just talking about sugar from fruit or starchy vegetables or things like that. They're talking about added sugar. So if you think about you're eating fruits and other food sources that have natural sugars in them, like milk, and then you're allowed to have 6 teaspoons on top of that a day. That's actually a lot of sugar. So hopefully they'll lower that in the future. But keep in mind that milk and fruit are naturally have sugar in them, and that's not a bad thing because the way that sugar is packaged in milk and fruit is much different than like a candy bar. But lower is better when you're reading the ingredient list. If it has sugar within the first 5 ingredients, it's probably not the best product to be eating. Now obviously if it says it's fruit in the product, that's a little different. Remember that there's about 60 different words for sugar, and there are some of the ones listed there. And that includes honey and agave and all those types of things. When you're reading labels, aim for 10 grams or less per serving, especially if you like to do granola bars or protein bars or anything like that. Try not to have it over 10 grams per serving. And then those are the recommendations. So protein. Protein benefits our muscles and it helps with tissue repair, which is important after your hardcore workouts if you're doing some sort of strength training. It helps with fluid balance, blood clotting, and vision. Cons, too much can lead to constipation if you're not getting enough fiber, if you're not getting enough fluids along with the protein. So as long as you're doing those 2 things, you should be okay. The kidney thing, that goes back and forth with the science too. Some experts say it can make an impact, some say no. I just say if you're falling within the range that's recommended for you, you should be okay unless you already have kidney problems. Then you do need to follow some restrictions. Sources of protein include legumes, beans, dairy, meat, fish, poultry, eggs, nuts, and seeds. Just again, limit the higher fat versions, so like the fattier meats and obviously the processed foods that have protein in them. Recommendations, you should be between 10 and 35% of your total daily calories. And again, for weight loss, we recommend that you go closer to the 35 as opposed to the 10. So you're coming down with the carb range and up with the protein range. And then your fat should be somewhere, again, between 20 and 30.
Excuse me. What are ingredients number 3 and 4?
Inulin is a type of fiber, and erythritol is a type of sugar. And that might actually be, it's sugar alcohol. So and that's good that you brought that up though, because if you're ever not sure what something is, you may want to look it up. And not everything that's like inulin, I know that's not a very common word, so you don't have to assume that it's bad. You may want to look it up. But if it's like a long scientific sounding word, those I am a little more cautious of. Everything else in there looks okay. But thank you for asking about it. Guargum too, that's kind of like a fiber.
Is that like a preservative guargum?
If I remember correctly, it helps hold things together.
Right.
Yeah.
Shelf stability or
Yes.
something.
Yep. So vitamins and minerals, I think they were proposing a change to this, and I think they were going to keep, iron and calcium. So according to research, most Americans do not get enough of those 2, and they can reduce the risk of some diseases and conditions. Calcium, I'm sure as women we all know that that's important for bones, especially as we get older. And then iron also is important for bones and muscles. And I think they might be getting rid of the vitamin A and vitamin C, but we'll see what happens. So buzzwords and claims. This is where it gets very tricky, even as a dietitian. There's just a lot of buzzwords that manufacturers use. So when you want to decrease the amount of certain nutrients, you will look for these 4 buzzwords, okay? So free means none or hardly any of this amount. So notice that that's kind of a broad spectrum. But an example would be sodium free. Low means a small amount, so an example might be low fat. Reduced means at least 25% less of the nutrient compared with a similar product. So like 25% less sugar or something like that. You might see that on like a granola bar. I think Quaker granola bars have that. An example is reduced in calories. And then light can be used on foods that are reduced in fat or reduced in calories. But again, there's just a lot of I wish they would streamline it a little more. And then the second bullet point is important to remember too. If it's lower in something, it might be higher in something else because they want it to be tasty or shelf stable or what have you. So sometimes if they pull out fat, for instance, they might increase the sugar. So keep that in mind. Other nutrition claims. When you want to increase the amount of certain nutrients, you can look for these three. Source. So if it says good source of. Contains a significant amount of the nutrients. An example would be good source of fiber. High or good source. I'm sorry, I have that backwards. Yes. Source contains a significant amount of the nutrient. High or good source contains a high amount of the nutrients. An example is high in vitamin C. Very high or excellent source contains a very high amount of the nutrients. An example is excellent source of calcium. Disease risk reduction claims. Example, a healthy diet low in saturated and trans fats. Oh, that got cut off. They reduce the risk of heart disease. So whatever the food is free of saturated and trans fats. Consumers should not solely rely on general health claims to make informed food choices. So again, just because it has all the bells and whistles on the front of the package, remember how I said like the nutrition facts label might look great when you go to the ingredient list and it kind of falls apart? So same thing, if it's got all the bells and whistles and buzzwords on the front, still look at the nutrition facts and the ingredient list to make sure everything is backing up the claims. All right, other tricky ones, whole wheat and whole grains. So if it says it's made with whole grains, it might only be made with white flour and a small amount of whole wheat. So again, these things aren't regulated very well. So what you want to look for is whole wheat flour somewhere in the ingredient list or really towards the top of the first ingredient, and 100% whole wheat flour. Multigrain, all that means is that that it was made with more than one grain. That's all that means. So look for whole grain, avoid enriched and bleached in the ingredient list. So if it says enriched white flour or whatever, try to avoid those terms. A good source of whole grains does not always equate with high fiber. So it might say a good source of whole grains on the front of the package, and then you look at the fiber content and it's, two is actually pretty good, but if it's like 0 or 1, and it could be higher than 2, but yeah. Sugar-free, no sugar added. This is something else, especially if you have blood sugar concerns, because I see a lot of people with blood sugar concerns and they're like, well, it's sugar-free so I can eat however much. But remember that carbohydrates break down into sugar when we eat them and process them in our bodies. So if it's sugar-free but it still has a lot of carbs, that's still a concern. Again, that's for people who are concerned about their blood sugars. So it is not the same as no carbs. Some foods have naturally occurring sugars. We talked about milk and fruits. There's no way to get around that. There's always going to be natural sugars in those foods, and that's good. Made with real fruit, contains real fruit juice. There's no law that requires how much real fruit needs to be used. So just because it says that on the front of the package, that could be the last ingredient on the list. Again, avoid high fructose corn syrup and sugar as the first 5 ingredients are most important. Natural, this is another really popular one now. This is not regulated by the FDA. It may use real ingredients, but there's no law, so they can put natural on whatever they want. It sounds great. Additives, so I think a lot of people are starting to become more aware of these types of things. So try to eat foods in their least processed, most natural form. Really, the more you can not eat out of a packaged food, the better. Colors, additives, and chemicals have been linked to allergies, micronutrient depletion, thyroid concerns, autoimmune disease, cancer, growth problems, GI concerns, asthma, and more. I'm not trying to scare you, but just keep in mind that we want to eat more fresh foods than processed foods. And then as far as what's to come, The FDA is proposing that the serving size be boldened instead of what should be consumed. It's going to be what usually is consumed. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I think I'd rather know what should be consumed as opposed to what we're typically consuming. So we'll see what happens with that. They want to make the calories more prominent because research shows that calories drive weight gain. This one I agree with. They want to have the added sugars listed. So I think that would be great. Because again, if you're looking at like yogurt, for instance, a flavored yogurt, well, some of those sugars are natural sugars that are found in plain old yogurt. So it would be nice to know how much is from the real yogurt and how much has been added in. So I think having the added sugars on the label will be helpful. And then, oh yes, that's what they wanted to do. So vitamin D and potassium, they want to include those because they have a lot to do with bone health and blood pressure. They want to replace those over vitamin C and vitamin A because it's showing that Americans don't get enough. So I guess they have a 2-year deadline to roll this out too. So hopefully we'll start seeing some changes soon. So I think I put this together a few months ago already. So this is what they want it to look like, the proposed. So you've got your current over here. So yeah, the calories would be bigger. Servings are boldened. Looks like they want the percent daily value over here, which I don't know if that makes too much of a difference. But yeah, then they'd have the added sugars here, and then they would replace some of the vitamins here, vitamin and mineral. So, and then the last thought, you can take charge of your health by taking it into your hands by starting to read labels. Questions? Yeah.
Back to ingredients. Does anybody know of a gluten-free bread that doesn't have a bunch of unpronounceable ingredients? When I go for gluten-free bread, anyone I pick up, it's maybe doesn't have wheat in there, but it's got all of these, and it's in the freezer. So I'm like, why are they putting all of these preservatives in there? And has anybody looked for or found a
Chuck Great Grains Bread is a fresh bread company in Delafield. It's farther away. There's not too many of them, but their bread is phenomenal and it has the gluten stock.
Okay.
But
I'm sorry, it's Chuck
Great Grains.
Oh, Great Grains.
Yeah. It's generally better bread than what you find in other places.
And it's locally made?
It's actually made in their own bakery. They make theirs
Awesome.
every day. And they have a list on their website of different breads along with the ingredients and everything there.
Do you know if they sell to any, like Sundays or any?
No,
You
they're a
have to go to
special
them.
bread company, unfortunately.
So you have to go to them? Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Great grains.
Great Grains is called.
What about like Ezekiel bread too? Have you tried that? or-
That's one of them. That has a bunch
It's got a
of.
bunch in there.
Yeah.
You just haven't looked. Okay. Ah, surprised.
I was very surprised.
But bread is one of those things that does need gluten.
It well,
Unfortunately, it's a binder, it's
Right.
like a glue, if you want to say the glue of food. And bread is one of them that needs to rise and fall, which creates the gluten. So,
There are breads without gluten.
yeah, but very few and far between, and most of them have been preservatives. So, bread's one of those hard things or tricky things about gluten.
yeah, and texture is really important to consumers too, and that can be tricky as well. I've tried some.
Aldi's has a gluten-free line. I don't know if their bread is any different.
Aldi's does?
Aldi's does.
Oh, okay.
Has a gluten-free line.
A lot of it, actually.
Yeah, very few. It's actually a good place to go for funky stuff, and you'd never believe it, but yeah.
And their line's called like Live G Free.
Yeah. They've
Okay.
created
But
their
they
own.
have, like when you get their flyer, they have like a page of all gluten-free stuff.
This
Nice.
week is gluten-free specials.
Yeah, I know they've got their Fit and Active line. I didn't
Which
know
is
they had
also
gluten
really
free.
That's pretty good.
Oh, okay.
No, thank you.
That is good to know, especially because some of the gluten-free stuff can be expensive if you go to, like gluten-free trading company, is that the name?
Trader Joe's?
No, there's an
the other
actual
one.
like gluten.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Not saying you shouldn't go there, but yeah, if you're looking for more reasonable, I would think Aldi's would be a little more reasonable.
Yeah, I would think that.
Love this one.
Other questions or Everybody doing well in the program? Hanging in there? What are we halfway through?
Oh, week 5.
5? Okay,
This
so
will be the next.
almost.
This is week 5.
Okay, all right. So we ended August.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Okay, well, if there's no other questions or concerns or comments, go and enjoy the rest of your evening.
I was supposed to write for anything.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah, you too. See you around.